Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Lovely to have you back again. Been a week since we last spoke. Today I'm joined by some really special people who I'm sure you're going to enjoy as much as I did. I'm joined firstly by Caroline McAlister, the Women's Equality Officer for the Alba Party. We're going to discuss this week's announcement from the EHRC on GRA reform. Later in the show I will be joined by Yvonne Ridley, by Iain Lawson, and by the Coatbridge Cavalier, Phil Boswell, who will discuss that same topic and also what's been happening this week. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed recording it with them. And I thought it was an appropriate time to get you on, Caroline, because it's been quite a week with the UK EHCR coming out, and it's been quite categoric that there is no need for the GRA reform, that it's covered adequately in the Equalities Act of 2010. Will this government pay any attention?
I don't think so, and I say that judging from the reaction, from the First Minister, Patrick Harvey, Maggie Chapman. It's been quite an eye-opener. I have grave concerns that we have extremists judging on their behaviour sat in our Parliament. Maggie Chapman is the co-convener of the Equalities, Human Rights and Civil Justice Committee, and she called the EHRC's measured intervention outrageous. Now her role is to be unbiased and to closely scrutinise all policy and legislation to ensure that everybody's rights are upheld. And clearly she is incapable of that remit, and For Women Scotland, among other women's groups, have called for her to step down because we've lost faith, trust and confidence in her abilities. And I think after her reaction, that's rightly so. I was disappointed to see the First Minister query the change in the EHRC's attitude to the GRA reform. But that's quite surprising, because most of us, most sentient, reasonable, rational human beings, when they're presented with new evidence, take that on board and change their opinions accordingly. So I don't see, I kind of feel that they're clutching at straws. They don't like what the HRSC has said. And I think I think there's an element of, if not blatant undermining them, there's an implication of them. They're alluding to them almost not being a credible organisation. And let's not forget, the EHRC are an independent statutory body that are respected right across the UK. So it's all, the behaviours are all a little bit, in my opinion, a bit bizarre, a bit extremist.
Just a bit. And of course, one of the clashes that come out, they were appointed by the Tories, so it's for the old, kill the source, because then that suits the argument. But let me put it to this way to you, Caroline. No matter what day, time, week, if someone asks you to go and debate something that you believe in and believe to be correct, you wouldn't be scared of debate, would you? No matter what the topic is. No. But they run scared. They won't debate it. So if this is your policy and you believe in it and you think the EHRC is wrong, they think that you're wrong and I'm wrong and every women's group's wrong, why not come debate it openly, rationally, and let's hear your arguments? Surely that's the way to do it.
Well, that's the adult way to do it, and that's the way to do it in a healthy democracy, in my opinion. I don't understand why they won't debate it. I suspect, having been immersed in this topic for a number of years, I suspect that their arguments their arguments are flimsy and deeply flawed. Sure. And that's why you end up getting a lot of abuse and a lot of hyperbole around the issues. And I don't think that their arguments stand scrutiny.
No, well, that's obviously the problem. But as you say, the Human Rights Commission people have said that this legislation isn't even necessary. The trans community, and that's the other thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've not met anyone in this debate from the opposed to the GRA reform who is opposed to people transitioning. Absolutely no one's against that. What people are objecting to is that giving away rights of other people to benefit other people, that's wrong. Doesn't matter what it is you're discussing or you're deciding, but you don't remove someone else's rights to improve someone else's. That's just the wrong way to do it. That's why we need debate.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. And what I find interesting is there are a number of transsexuals that are opposed to the proposals in the bill, especially self-ID, because they recognise the dangers of that and the inability to undertake any meaningful safeguarding. And it also places them at risk because, you know, I've said this so many times, transsexuals have been around for many, many years. It almost seems as though as Stonewall expanded the trans umbrella to bring in basically anybody and everybody who says they're trans, including people with fetishes and kinks, it's almost like these people have taken over and they're masquerading as trans rights activists, when in actual fact what they're doing is having a detrimental effect on a number of trans people. Yeah.
But if someone's genuinely got dysphoria, you would want them to have medical advice and a medical examination. Why would you want to put that to the side and say, well, you don't need it, just identify? It doesn't make sense medically or any other way.
Well, so much of this argument or this issue doesn't make sense. Of course, if someone has distress because of their body and there's a disconnect there, they need some sort of psychotherapeutic intervention to help them to understand what's going on and why they feel that the way they feel. And often there are underlying issues that come to the fore by going through that process. That's testimony that's been given directly to me from trans people who I've spoken to, who have said, you know, they had behaviours that at times placed them at risk and they didn't understand why they behaved that way. But by going through the process of transition and being able to access that therapeutic input, they were able to identify incidents in their past that were unresolved. And they were then supported to resolve those incidents. So within themselves, they became happier, more content individuals. It's utterly bizarre. And then you have the massive contradiction where it's not a medical condition, so there does not need to be any medical intervention. Oh, but we'll put aside millions of pounds for trans healthcare. Surely it's got to be one or the other.
Yeah, you're being logical now, Caroline. Stop being logical. That would we can't bring logic into this argument. But the other one is that under the Equalities Act 210, as you point out in your wonderful article today, gender identity is not a protected category, but sex is. Whereas the Scottish Government have reversed that, and thereby gender are protected, but sex is not. Yes. That, you know, surely apart from anything else, is this not going to end up in the law courts?
Well, the Scottish Government seem quite keen to be in the law courts these days. We're still waiting on the outcome of the judicial review from that For Women Scotland undertook. And that was when the Scottish Government changed the definition of women in the 50-50 representation of Boards Act, where they redefined women to include anybody. We have, I believe, a hearing coming up soon. Fair Play for Women are taking the Scottish Government to court because with the census, the Scottish government have said that they will not ask people sex, they will ask people their gender. So what about people that don't have a gender? And gender is about feelings. How can you know, the census is really important for planning ahead, resources, etc. And you need to have as good a picture of the demographic of your nation as possible in order to get beneficial and effective services in place. How can you do that when it's all but impossible to collate accurate data based on gender? Because every day there are new genders.
Yeah, well, apparently so. Yeah, I saw another one. The latest pronoun I saw is IEL, I-E-L. It's been taken from the French, the male il and the female elle, and it's now IEL is they. That's your new pronoun. Right. There you go. See, every day's a school day when you come here, Caroline. Every day's a school day. I mean, it is just, some of it is such nonsense. But, you know, the other one is that, you know, everything, as soon as you dare to question anything, you're immediately attacked and labelled as some kind of transphobe, racist, homophobe. And that doesn't lead to decent discussion. And I do not, for the life of me, understand why the First Minister and the leadership of the SNP will not debate this if they so believe that it's the correct way to go. I mean, when Section 28 was openly debated, why not this if they are right? And she said, but the other one was that they mentioned was the 2 consultations. Have you seen these consultations? Has anyone seen the consultations?
Well, I know that the second consultation attracted a significant number of responses. The first consultation, the vast majority of people didn't know it was going on. The second consultation, women were better organised and there was a massive response. But what's interesting about these consultations is that the only ones that have been published are from organisations that agree with the Scottish Government's position. The rest of the thousands and thousands of others are unpublished. And the other thing about this whole, you know, more and more it becomes more concerning that our government seems to operate by, at best, you could call it being disingenuous. You know, Nicola Sturgeon told women our concerns aren't valid. Clearly not valid. Clearly the EHRC have said, yes, there are valid concerns. But in the SNP's manifesto, you know, I saw her say that, you know, but the people voted for it. The people didn't know about it. They put it in their manifesto. They put in on page, I think, 32, 33 about reforming the Gender Recognition Act. There was no mention of self-ID, and self-ID is the big issue. And they know that self-ID is the big issue. Nobody wants people who are distressed with their body and have psychological issues. Nobody wants people to be further distressed. And I don't believe that Scotland is a bigoted country. I actually think that a lot of this has come about because of no debate. And let's not forget, it's a great tactic to shut people up, to call them a bigot, to call them a transphobe, because nobody wants to be called those things. I think in general, people are pretty tolerant and understanding, and certainly the vast majority, if not all of the women that I have now connected with over the years, very much have an attitude of live and let live. But there are concerns with what these advocacy or these lobby groups and these activists are asking for. And I think that's another issue that needs to be addressed, the abrogation of responsibility of our government for policy development. Why are lobby groups who they fund to tell them that we agree with the Scottish government, it's just, you know, ridiculous. It's ludicrous that what's going on. We don't have a transparent government. And I think that is detrimental to the Scottish nation. And I think that the style of governance in Scotland has regressed in recent years.
Yeah, you've pointed out, I get sent through some stuff that today on some of the money that they're sending to these groups you're talking about, and these are the only ones that have been allowed to respond or talk. And I'm finding it goes back to what I said about they're calling protected characteristic. And if I've got places like Close the Gap, gender is their protected characteristic, and they get £256,000. In gender, they got £365,000. We've got Equate Scotland again on career-wise, 98,000. Equate Scotland a positive action gender, 64,000. Equate Scotland another payment of 250,000, and Women's Library 151,000. It goes on and on and on. 250. The Scottish Trans Alliance £250,000, and yet, you know, we can't give kids in primary 6 and 7 a free school meal because we can't afford it, but we're giving it to these groups. And then we're saying, oh, well, they're all in favour of it. Well, of course they're in favour of it. He who pays the piper names the tune. So
absolutely,
we have to take this into the open, Caroline. How do we get it into the open?
I think we just have to keep talking about it. You know, I mentioned the legal action that's taking place. I think it's next week or the week after, where Fair Play for Women are taking the Scottish Government to court. Well, the Scottish Trans Alliance have been given leave to join the Scottish Government in that action. And the Scottish Trans Alliance, who are funded by the Scottish Government, and indeed their legal representation is funded by the Scottish Government. So here we are digging deep into our pockets to fund Fair Play for Women to take this legal action. And then you've got the Scottish Government and I think it's the Scottish Trans Alliance, and we're paying for their time, their lawyers' time, and the Scottish Government are using our taxpayers' money. It's just a farce. It's a massive grift, and they have the audacity to point the finger at cronyism down in Westminster. Absolutely, there is corruption and cronyism rife in Westminster, but the whole time they're pointing the finger, saying, "Oh, look over there, look over there." People are being distracted and not scrutinising what's going on in Scotland.
Yeah, that's absolutely what they're trying to do. But the EHRC said that they made it clear the new legislation is unnecessary. It doesn't. It's not required. That is covered in the Quality Act of 2010. So what is the motivation behind this? Have you figured that bit out?
There are a number of theories floating about, none of which I'm going to repeat. I really genuinely don't know why the Scottish Government have become so fixated on this. It has caused horrendous problems within the party. The party split. Many of us who were committed and devoted to the party, who were out chapping doors, pounding pavements, etc., through every campaign, were ostracised, and many of us have left. And yet we still go down. The government are still determined to drive down this route. And there's this nonsense about meeting with women's groups. They only made the commitment to meet with women's groups after it was revealed in the press that they hadn't met with any women's groups. And then they only met with a few groups and rejected a number of other groups' requests for a meeting, and they got palmed off to some civil servant. Yet I understand, since this process started, there has been over 200 meetings with lobby groups that are in favour of this policy. So I really don't know why the Scottish Government are determined to push this through when it's so deeply unpopular. We've had 3 recent polls, and every poll has come back with the same result, that the vast majority of people in Scotland oppose self-ID. There are people within the party that oppose self-ID. But she doesn't seem to be listening.
No, she also said on a recent interview that, all the polls indicate that we were elected in this mandate, and all the polls indicate that Scotland is behind us. Well, as you pointed out, I've not seen a poll yet that's less than 80%, 90% against, when people are told what it is. And this is probably why she's not come out and saying it. But and I believe that sooner or later this is going to harm them electorally. And it just doesn't even make good politics, does it, Caroline?
No, it's politically. I believe it's political suicide, and I know they'll counteract my opinion with, oh, but we got elected in May 21, and it didn't harm us. It didn't harm them because people didn't know. You know, they say that it was part of their manifesto, and it was, but the vast majority of people don't read the manifesto. It's only political anoraks like myself and probably yourself that read manifestos. My question to the Scottish Government is, if they're so convinced that what they're doing is the right thing, why did they not put information on the campaign literature that went through voters' doors? Not one area mentioned GRA reform, not one mention of self-ID, and there's no mention of self-ID in their manifesto either.
No, and as I say, since then the First Minister's tried to imply it was there, they were elected on it.
No.
We're coming towards the end here, Caroline, and I know the amount of effort and work you and many other ladies and ladies groups put in. What can the people out here watching this do to assist and help? Apart from making donations to some of these legal funds, what can they do to help you?
They can talk to friends, they can talk to family, they can talk to the queue in the supermarket, the queue at the bus stop. They can get involved. There are a number of Scottish feminists. There's a network online, and there's groups in most areas throughout Scotland. If somebody wants to get active, get in touch. It's about informing the public of what's going on, because the last 12 months there's been a big change. More and more people are becoming more aware. We're out on the streets, we're doing street stalls, we're doing meetings, we're doing all sorts of events and activities to raise awareness. And certainly I notice a difference. In the early days, people would go, I don't know what you're talking about. And you would explain it to them, and very quickly they would see the implications of what's been proposed and were horrified. Whereas these days, it's more about people have an idea of what's going on, but they don't quite understand the implications of it all. But very quickly, when you talk about it, they understand. It's about, you know, that saying, knowledge is power. And that's what we need to do. We need to get that information out as wide as possible to the people of Scotland.
Yep, and the other thing I would like to add is that this isn't just a fight for the ladies. That all you men watching, it's, you know, you've got wives, you've got daughters, you've got sisters, you've got granddaughters. We have to get involved as well. Every man putting his shoulder to the wheel as well. Everybody needs to get on this if we're going to protect our children and our grandchildren and our wives and daughters.
Yeah.
Caroline,
absolutely, Roddy.
And that's you know, thank you on behalf of society for what you're doing, and all the ladies who are putting themselves in danger, in which and the abuse you're all taking. Got to thank you so much, and thank you for being with me tonight. And I shall see you soon, very soon. In fact, I shall see you
very soon.
You take care. Thank you very much.
You too, Roddy. Thank you. Bye.
See you soon. Bye. To join me today to discuss my conversation there with Caroline, I'm joined by Yvonne Ridley, Phil Boswell and Iain Lawson. Lady and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
It was interesting talking to Caroline. I'm sure you all saw the press release that came out from Caroline, the women's convener. This whole thing, Yvonne, the fact that the UK EHRC's come out and said you don't even need this legislation, it kind of flies in the face of the amount of effort and everything that's going on with the Scottish Government to push this through.
Well, I keep wondering at the way that the Scottish Government is acting and behaving. It's as though they hate women. You know, this is it's just really bizarre. All women deserve political representation, and this Caroline's open letter obviously drives home that fact. But I mean, she isn't alone. There are other female politicians, very well-known heavyweights like Joanna Cherry, who, you know, must be a thorn in the side to these misogynists and women haters in the SNP. And then, you know, well, there's also Joan McAlpine and other female politicians. But it's not just politicians that have got upset, it's ordinary grassroots women. And this madness has to stop. All that the Scottish Government was asked was just let's have a pause with the GRA. Let's think it over. Let's review this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no one's saying, changing your mind isn't a sign of weakness. If anything, it's a sign of strength. But it's that they've gone way overboard. The Scottish Government is moving ahead like a juggernaut.
Yeah, it's as I was saying to Caroline, if you believe something and you have, I mean, you'll go anywhere, any day, any time to debate it. And the very fact that the Scottish Government have refused to debate this, even with their own members, let alone with the general public, it immediately makes you suspicious. Well, if you're right, why are you scared to debate it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a sign of enormous weakness. I mean, they're beginning to panic now because there's no doubt the public are catching on to what's going on and what's involved in this. And their level of fear about it's getting greater and greater. Now, I think we're going to be discussing later Shona Robinson's refusal to meet Caroline, to even discuss it using the excuse that she's a member of a political party. I can't remember when membership of a political party barred you from meeting a minister. This is a completely alien prospect to me, and I've been involved in politics since 1974. So, you know, I mean, it's also very, very cheeky, because, I mean, the way you could interpret that letter that she got was, if you give up the membership of the Alba Party, I'll maybe talk to you. And what right does an SNP cabinet minister have to use that as a reason for not getting involved? And I mean, I'm going to have some fun with this, because later on, we're going to discuss the obscene amounts of money that are going to these gender organisations. We're talking millions. And I want to know, if we're bothered about membership of political parties, I want to know how many jobs are being paid for in these gender organisations to people who are members of the SNP and the Green Party, and who this money is allowing them to be full-time advocates of crazy policies, because that's the only word you can use. Crazy, obscene and outrageous and unfair policies against every other woman living in the country. I'm a grandfather. I don't want to see this happening. I want my granddaughter to grow up in Scotland safe. And if these nutters get away with imposing this on the people of Scotland, then my granddaughter's not going to be safe. And they will never be forgiven if anything happens to anyone's granddaughter because of this absolute nonsense. I'm enraged, and the whole of Scotland should be enraged.
Phil, I mean, every single opinion poll that's come out on this, the Scottish people, when they're advised of this, are massively opposed to this particular legislation. Not to GRA reform. That I don't think is the problem. I think people are accepting that. It's the self-identification part, the no medical intrusion, the no psychiatric evaluation, which is all there just now. Why would they why wouldn't you debate that and try and alleviate people's fears?
If I can jump in there on Ian's point
Well, he would have, because Phil's muted himself anyway.
About the vast sums of money that have been spent. I mean, I have spoken to trans people, not trans activists, because you can't have a conversation with them, but there are trans people out there who are in desperate need of help and would, need to be fast-tracked in the health service to be able to get the help that they need with all the issues around being a trans person. And some of them are having to sit on waiting lists for 2 years before they get any form of counselling. And yet there's the Scottish Government throwing money round like water. Well, why don't they throw that money at the health service to help the trans people?
Absolutely.
Instead of funding these trans activists who, are just driven by hatred of women. That's the only explanation that I can come up with for their behaviour.
Well, there has been, she announced last week or the week before, there was extra money going into this. But here's catch this, Phil. Here's the problem. They're saying with the Act that there's no need for medical intervention and it's not a medical issue. And yet they're throwing extra money, albeit not enough, Yvonne, I accept that. But in the same breath, they're then throwing extra money saying, well, we need to have extra money in to look after these people. Well, it can't be, again, she's talking about not valid complaints. She's arguing one way and shooting the other. But which is it?
Yeah, I just touching on a few points that everybody's brought up. Not to have dialogue on something as critical, this is criminal. It's evolutionary. We're moving at such a fast pace. Our society is changing at such a rate. We're introducing laws and legislation over an ever more complicated network of laws and legislation that contradict each other. I mean, I remember there was, I looked at this situation similar to the Section 30 plebiscite argument. We're asking the same question where the answers change. There was a scenario where Einstein was teaching somewhere, I think it was Switzerland, and he presented an examination paper to a class, and his assistant said to him after it, "You've just submitted the same question you did to the same class 1 year ago." And he says, "Yes, that's correct." And the assistant says, "Why on earth did you do that?" He says, "Because the answers changed." This is evolutionary. If we don't talk about this, if we don't include every stakeholder, and that's me, just as Ian said, I've got daughters and a wife. I don't want them exposed to additional risk on decisions made by whom. What are the qualifications of these people if they won't even debate with us? If they won't be open and transparent and show us the evidence? We're not stupid people. We're serious people. Talk to us as adults. Treat us as adults, because it's our children. What I've noted is it's mostly gay and lesbian people that are involved in this, most of whom don't have children. What's your stake in it? Well, when we come on to the money, you'll see what the stake is.
Ian, the other thing is, it's not just the money, which we will come on to, but the daughters and granddaughters, it's the whole of society that's going to be affected. And as I said to Caroline at the end there, it's up to more men to get involved in this and to assist, because it affects everybody, not just young women and young girls. And the attack is saying, "Oh, you're accusing all trans people of being paedophiles and predators." Well, we're not. What we're saying is that predators and paedophiles will use this legislation as an easy route to get to get to victims. That's just a fact. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to work that one out.
Absolutely. I mean, there's prior evidence that is a route that has already been taken in the past. So, we need to be very, very aware of it. But I'm cheered by those like Yvonne and others who, are open to getting support from men, increasingly open, because that's a sign and very good news for Yvonne and her colleagues that the message is getting through when ever-increasing numbers of men are understanding what the women are saying and coming in behind them to support them in their fight. And that's got to be good news. And of course, that's another thing that will be worrying the SNP, because I think they hope to be able to get this through, to be able to sideline the women by suggesting it's only ultra-feminists and etc., that are against this. What they're realising now is there's a lot of people involved in this, both male and female, who have looked at the issues, who recognise the dangers. And, you're not going to get away with saying the people of Scotland elected us to bring in this legislation. There wasn't a word about self-ID in the SNP manifesto. And what was mentioned about gender reform was vague. It wasn't, we're going to change this big time and we're going to use self-ID to do it. So I think the SNP are beginning to worry. And I noticed Believe in Scotland sent out a poll the other week there, basically, I think, to gauge just how much trouble are we in here. And I happily filled it in the hope that it added to the trouble they were in, and they recognise that they've made a bad mistake here. And as Yvonne says, the very least they should do is pause with this and reconsider.
Yeah, because that's the thing, Yvonne. If we go back to Section 28, which at that time was a groundbreaking societal change and move, it was openly debated. There was people for it, people against it. There was, but it was in the open and it was discussed. And everyone is now relaxed about that. Everyone feels that was good legislation. It's fair. It's this. I go back to Yvonne. If you're hiding something, no matter what it is, it makes you ultra suspicious. So that is the problem, is it not? That's not in the open.
Well, that's quite right, but they're marginalising, or the net effect of this has been to marginalise the wrong sort of people, because, women have been oppressed for centuries. And now that we're starting to make a little bit of traction, it's been taken away from us. Well, it's just not going to happen. The other major set of people who are feeling marginalised is the gay community. And I sat down with a couple just a few days ago, and they said as well that they've made so many great inroads over the years to be able to walk together hand in hand and be accepted and get public acceptance. And now these trans activists, and it is the activists, it's not the trans people, these trans activists are accusing gays of being transphobic, because gay men who say, I could never look at a trans man in the same way or be attracted as I am to another man, and a lesbian expressing the same view, they're being labelled as transphobic. This is an entire community that's fought bigotry, oppression, and prejudice for decades, and now they're told that they're transphobic, and it's, what is this all about? The net effect will be a backlash, and I can't for the life of me understand this insatiable drive and push to get this through come hell or high water. And you just feel as though, what's happened to the democracy. And, this is alien in Scotland. It's the sort of thing that you expect from the Tories. It's coming from the SNP and this alliance they have with the Scottish Greens.
The other thing, just last on this, Phil, is Out for Indy, which is a group within the SNP. They have been labelling it, they have people opposing it and supporting the EHRC here as Nazis. I mean, they use the term Nazis and Hitler and anti-Semites. Now, how you can conflate that? What kind of mind do you have to say? Because, well, wait a minute, I'm worried about this self-identification. I think it could cause dangers. It could allow predators to abuse it. Oh, well, that makes you a Nazi then. And transphobe. Does it really? I mean, yeah, you're laughing. But it's, Phil, it's bizarre. It's mental.
Yeah, it is. It's so far removed from what Yvonne said. What Western civilization is based upon is the sovereignty of the individual, and this move into group identity politics, and judge a person by the group that you put them into and they belong to, and victimology, splitting people into victims and the victims and the oppressor. What we've got here is children's politics. This is an extremely low resolution solution to a problem. They deem it a solution to a societal problem that's very, very complex. And when you're possessed by an ideology, there is no logic. There is no discussion to be had. We're correct. This is our mantra. And look at the, as I said before, look at the people that are drawn into it. It's young, very, very much the young people and the ideologically possessed who are right to be pushing themselves, push the limits to the left, push the limits to the right, find out where you sit. Where is that Overton window for me? And the other thing we ought to remember is these people are not our enemies. These are our children that are being possessed by this ideology. Where's it coming from? That and who's funding it? They're the key questions for me. And I don't want to. I want to find my own kids. I argue with my kids all the time, but I'm of an age where obviously I ceased being cool a very long time ago, if ever I was indeed. So I've got no worries about sticking out and standing up for what I believe in, but it is madness. And if we allow this ideological possession, this tail to wag the dog, then a mere glance at 20th century history tells us this isn't going to end well.
No.
Well,
sorry, on you go.
I was just going to say, Phil, Phil and myself were discussing this earlier on this week, and another key indicator that their case is very, very weak is their desperate desire to create new words, to have this dialogue that nobody understands, because they think that gives them some sort of superiority and that people will be scared to enter the debate because they're not used with all that terminology. But you were speaking about this, Phil, earlier on this week.
Yeah, it is, but there are so many more. Now, I'm not saying it's not important, but let's just go to it. It's 0.004% of the population. And this has caused the division, the splitting of the SNP, the splitting of the S movement, absolute mayhem. And I'm not saying that I'm like everyone else. I'm relaxed with the people transitioning. It's the all other mechanisms behind it, but there's other things happening which we should be focusing on, which the Scottish government should be focusing on. And when we're looking at the debacle that's going on down south here with Boris and this carry on, and I thought it was almost hysterical that Ian Blackford turned around and said, it makes you suspicious, the civil servants report that the government are hiding behind a police inquiry. It's terrible and shocking. And I thought, wait a minute. I think I've heard this story before.
Yeah, well, I tweeted earlier on today about the missing 1,100 words from the inquiry into the First Minister's behaviour in the Salmond case. It's quite hypocritical for her to come on and say, we need the full report, every word must be published. She spent most of the last 18 months doing her best to keep everything out from being published, So, I think most folk just look and shake their heads at Ian Blackford and Nicola Sturgeon when they have zero credibility in terms of honesty. And I hope Nicola's getting a fee for teaching Boris how useful the police and the justice system can be when you want to stop things getting published, because it's definitely been a tactic. The Met, must be in great shame here. People were pleading with them to look at it for months and they strongly resisted it. And then basically he came up with the idea of the Grey inquiry, and he hoped that would buy him enough time, for it all to dampen down. But what happened was a whole lot of new stuff came out. So he had to come up with something to cover him again. And I'm pretty sure he picked up the phone and told the police there would have to be an investigation, and they've fallen in behind at his behest. you know. I mean, what we're probably looking at here, let's be honest, we're looking at a cash for honours inquiry, which goes on for months and months and months, and at the end of it, there's no prosecution of anything, you know. And here, in this case, it'd only be fixed penalties anyway, you know. It's a joke.
Yeah, but Yvonne, you must have got the report from Sue Gray, who looked at it and thought, oh, wait a minute. And as Ian says, he said, what can we do next? And they're just playing for time. I mean, it's like I was at my granddaughter's birthday party yesterday, so I think I should have an inquiry and get my son to inquire to see if I was actually at the party and was at a party, because there was no cheese and wine and I didn't have a suit on. I mean, it's a nonsense, Yvonne.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't want Boris Johnson to go from down because I think he's one of the best advocates for indirect too. But, you know, the Tories are absolute masters at prevarication and obfuscation. And this, even the Tory who crossed the floor to join the ranks of Labour, I'm beginning to wonder that actually saved Boris's skin. That very act galvanised temporarily the Tories sitting behind Boris Johnson, and they seem to unite at this act of treachery. And I'm wondering if this MP was told, "We'll go and take one for the team and cross over, and we'll bring you back, you know, when it's safe." I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, I apologise. But, you know,
It'll never be safe.
To keep in power. He's absolutely desperate. So, you know, these are, I was going to say, interesting times, but it just makes me wonder, would the MPs from Scotland not be better off just getting up, walking out of the House, withdrawing from Westminster, and everybody pushing as hard as hell to deliver indirect to? We shouldn't be embroiled in this pantomime or theatre involving the Tories and the Tory lights that are, you know, led by Keir Starmer. But we shouldn't be involved in that.
Yeah. Well, the only way to get the SNP MPs to withdraw from the chamber is to get an ALBA MP to stand up to speak. That's the only time they leave the chamber. So they can be. But Phil, do you not think it's kind of indicative that the fact that a Tory can just cross and quickly sit? You were down there. You've seen it firsthand. But he can cross the floor and quite happily sit beside the Labour Party, because they are, to quote the phrase, two cheeks of the same bum.
Yeah, I mean,
between them.
It's become the American system. Is what we've become.
Not joining us. That's what should have happened, because this, you know, this Tory has an appalling record on immigration, on being anti-Europe, and lots of other really nasty things in his background. He's very young. He's one of Boris Johnson's team.
Children. Oh, I thought you said one of his children. I mean, you just don't know these days for Boris. Maybe he is one of his children. Could be.
Yeah, I mean, they are exactly the same. It's become the American system. The great thing about the British system previously, we remember Labour, we were all ex-Labour when it was a behemoth, when it was the beast, and it stood up for the working class and for the left. And you had a centre ground, which I find myself, as I get older, more comfortable in, which was liberalism, the old classic English Liberal Party. But now the reason this guy can jump across is because when you deconstruct Labour and you take Corbyn and the left out of the Labour Party, you're left with what you've got now, Keir Starmer, and a reinvention of New Labour. So, there is no difference between this guy. And on the Bonds point, the reason he can cross the room is most people are not paying attention. If we were paying attention, we would see what kind of man this was. And I mean, I would be aware of Trojan horses if I was the Labour Party here, in one sense. But moreover, the sad fact that the management of perception, which is politics all over the world, sets down the fact that most people aren't paying attention and just see a win for Labour over Conservative.
Well, there's no risk for this guy though, Roddy. I mean, it was traditionally a Labour seat. Labour were only 400 votes behind them, when he won that seat. And, at that time, there was something like an 11% Tory lead across the country. The position's completely changed. It's Labour in the lead across the UK now. And those 400 votes would not be there. So he'd probably thinking about his own seat at the end of the day. I think we're going to make this all far too scientific. This guy's trying to save his own skin. That's what's going on. It's as simple as that.
But the fact is, Evan, and I've said it, I'm sick of tweeting about it, I'm sick of writing about it, but you get rid of Boris. I'm with Yvonne, keep him. All that said, they'll just replace him with another right-wing, neoliberal, nutcase. But what's the point of getting rid of him? Because it's not going to improve. It's not as if Nelson Mandela or Bishop Tutu's waiting in the wings to come in to save the nation. It's just going to be another right-wing nutter. Yep.
No, I think that is the case. I don't think MD's got any great hopes about who the successor is, I saw a funny tweet today about a guy who tweeted saying he wasn't upset about the £500,000 fare for Liz Truss to go to Australia. It was the return trip he was worried about.
If I may on that point, I mean, what we shouldn't underestimate is the ruthlessness in the organisation and the power brokers that are behind the Tory party and what's actually going on here. What you've got is a third-rate group of ministers currently in government who were not in anywhere near consideration for a ministerial post in any serious Conservative government. And what they're doing now is they're riding out the downturn until it bottoms out. Then they can blame Boris and move on. Blame Boris the buffoon. And the reality is it's a con game. You look at follow the money. Where's this come from? This comes from hedge funds. Who financed this Brexit manoeuvre? Who's the only people that are benefiting from it? So we'll all take these massive hits in the energy, loss of jobs, the removal of all our rights, the continued deterioration of democracy in this country, and they'll blame Boris the buffoon, and he'll wander off and collect his big paycheck from the City of London after all the carnage has been wrought. And these clowns that he's got are really, I know quite a number of them, and really they were backbench malleable, bench warmers. That's all they were.
Yeah, there's a danger in Scotland that people think that if we got a Labour government, that would make things better. What they're forgetting is the historic role of the Labour Party is to win an election every 10 to 15 years and enact the legislation the Tories would never dare. And that has been the history of Britain over the last 30 or 40 years, So there's no hope for Scotland from a Labour government. And, we should make sure that doesn't get the opportunity to rise again, because we spent 20, 30 years under Thatcher and others saying, if only we could get a Labour government, everything would be fine. We got the Labour government and they were worse. I mean, we really don't want to get down that road again.
No, but Yvonne, we're running out of time, but there's one other subject I'd like to go on, and we actually discussed it a wee bit last week, and that was the sell-off or the sell-out, if you like, of the wind technology, etc., and the wave technology, because people are still angry about it. And we've made some foreign corporates, they're going to make a lot of money out of it. But what I find the most disturbing thing, Yvonne, is that our government couldn't even think of negotiating with these foreign corporates to say, and we want, 5% of all revenues in perpetuity. We want that, or 5% of the profits, whatever, something, or 10%, I don't know, but a figure that would have given Scotland in perpetuity some money that would have helped our local authorities, would have helped infrastructure, whatever. That is the worrying thing for me.
Yeah, I think I tweeted at the time, "Gone with the wind." I mean, it took me back to the days of when Thatcher sold off all the silver, and I hate to say that because, you know, I'm drawing parallels with Scotland's First Minister, but I have to say that is immediately what I thought. The negotiating team involved in this were either extremely naive or inexperienced. It was really, it was awful, and I'm hoping that when Scotland does get its independence, these sort of things can be renegotiated, and hopefully these fools in the negotiating team will have read the small print in the contracts drawn up, because this is selling. It was just a golden opportunity that was missed, and people from the left to the right are saying, what the hell did they just do?
Call me a cynic if you like, Phil, but over the next couple of years, I'm going to be looking for any members of the Scottish Government or MPs that get directorships like the Tories do in foreign power companies, or am I just too cynical in my old age?
I don't think you can be cynical enough. This is my area of expertise in energy, and we could have several programmes about this, but Yvonne's 100% right. This is amateur. It's amateur or corrupt, and the application of Occam's razor tells me it's amateur. And I'm looking at, when you think of these numbers, it's just, and you compare the numbers we spoke about earlier on. I know we're going to finish soon, but we were going to talk about the numbers, the 4.2 million of the figures we looked at earlier on, Roddy, that we shared for the Scottish Government's funding of independent bodies and organisations. And I'm looking at gender and GBTI. Of the 4.2 million, they get 38% of funding for 4% of the population. Disability gets 37% of the funding for 20% of the population. Race gets 5.6% of the funding for 4% of the population. And faith, 4.29% of funding for 4.2% of the population. I mean, there's so many questions and there's some assumptions made there, but who decides on the canonical categories that get the money, and how this postmodernism is applying itself in our modern society? Why is it gender? Why is it not IQ? You know, what about all the other categories in which you would split people into groups? Anyway, I disagree with it, but there's something is rotten in the state of Denmark, as the saying goes.
It's Iain, corruption, stupidity. But let's just look in the positive that we were independent. Would you want to put the same people who negotiated this deal down to negotiate with the sharks in London, Scotland's secession from the British Union? Can you imagine how bad that would be for the same people?
All I'll tell you is about the reorganisation of the police force in Estonia after independence. There was one qualification to be a policeman in Estonia, and that was not to have been a policeman. Estonia wasn't independent. And they took one look at it, saw how corrupt it was, and decided there's no fixing this, we'll start again. And that's what we would need to do in Scotland in some areas of our life here. You know, we really need to, really sharpen up. Phil's right. I mean, I was in business 40 years. I just took one look at that deal and just absolutely despaired. And I don't believe any businessman of any note anywhere in Scotland would have ever signed up to a deal where you would give away in perpetuity, not even for a fixed term, in perpetuity, that seabed, for £700 million. It's the worst deal in the world. And what makes it even worse is the First Minister and her acolytes went on TV and in the media trying to spin it as a good deal. I mean, who do they think they're dealing with in Scotland? Do they think, we just zip up the back? I mean, you wouldn't be able to get that past, school kids at secondary. They would look at that deal and say there's something badly wrong here. You had no chance of selling that to the public as being a good deal. It was a dreadful deal.
Yeah, I mean, Betty Windsor gets more money out of it than Scotland. She does all right out of it.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, good old Betty. Anyway, folks,
maybe needs it for Andrew's court cases.
Controversial. No, I'm not going to. No, I nearly said something that I could be serious.
I was just throwing a hook out there for you, Roddy.
You nearly got me. The techie would have had to do a bit of editing there.
I saw your eyes into it.
You did. You know me too well. Yvonne, Phil, Ian, thank you very much for being with us tonight to get this. And I hope you have the rest of your weekend is pleasant. And I will, see you all again soon. And to you, our viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as we have. And we'll see you soon. Until then, please, take care. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed talking to all our guests today. But firstly, let me apologise for our slight delay in getting the show out. We did get our normal Sunday time. I'm in Dubai. We've got Techie is over there in the Emerald Isle. We've got one in Paisley, one in Spain, where Phil is, and someone in the borders. And the whole thing became a wee bit difficult to pull together. So I apologise for the delay, and I hope it didn't spoil your enjoyment of the show. And on Thursday we're doing our first road show, and we will be in the Kingdom of Fife at the Albalaku with the road show. And if you're going to be there in Fife on Thursday, we look forward to talking to you. But to the rest of you, till we see you again, you take care now.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.